What happens when a new homeowner clashes with a self-proclaimed neighborhood enforcer over parking rules? Welcome to my chaotic initiation into suburban life, where laughter and rebellion may just save the day. As I stood there, my heart racing and grasping the door handle of the moving truck, I glanced over at Karen, whose tailored outfit looked suspiciously like a justice uniform for a neighborhood messiah. Her piercing blue eyes drilled into me, an undeniable challenge to anyone who dared trespass on her immaculate, achingly boring patch of suburbia. I tried to muster my most charming smile, but it was drowned out by Karenspeak. It's against HOA rules for vehicles to block the grass, right? Because apparently a 24-hour moving truck is a crime against humanity, and her virtue was the only thing saving the neighborhood. It was absurd, really. I could feel the tension in my muscles, a twang of annoyance, mixed mysteriously with the scent of freshly cut grass, and I particularly enjoyed my grass. Thank you very much. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of patience that I could muster. I understand, Karen, but I'm literally moving in. It's just for a moment, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, while internally berating myself for not having a more clever comeback. Like, why don't you politely inquire about my 2 cats lounging on the new porch? But Karen wouldn't let up. She launched into a masterclass about HOA regulations, as if they were etched on stone tablets delivered personally by a neighborhood deity. With each line that dripped from her lips, my resolve flipped between mild annoyance and outright contempt. Karen obviously derived some sick pleasure from enforcing rules that made even the mansion owners blush. To her, I was not a new neighbor, but a villain, aiming to paint mustaches on her precious yard signs. Just when I thought I had to either humor her or unleash the power of sarcasm, a glimmer of hope emerged. The familiar sound of police sirens pierced the quiet suburban backdrop. I knew that sound well. It was my brother Ethan, patrolling the neighborhood with his equally laid-back sarcasm, that, if anything, often stood in contrast to a Karen. I shot him a half-hearted wave as he rolled up, his cruiser pulling to a halt by my truck. If only he knew the unraveling drama of my HOA initiation. With a raised brow, Ethan stepped out, the sun glinting off his badge as he made his way toward us. A slight smirk tugged at his lips, always the jokester even in uniform, while I couldn't help but wonder if he could sense the absurdity of the situation brewing like coffee on a Monday morning. Hey, Jordan. Need a hand moving in, or are you just here for the HOA roast? Ethan called out, clearly taking in the grandeur of my parking predicament. Before I could even explain the complication, Karen hijacked the moment, her expression triumphantly smug. Officer, I have a situation here. This man is clearly violating HOA regulations. With an exaggerated wave of her arm, she gestured at my moving truck, her vital moment of glory served on a silver platter. What was once meant to be a simple greeting morphed into a front-row seat to the Karen Show, Episode 1, The Battle Over Grass Parking. I could practically see the glee in her eyes. Someone was finally listening to her rant about grass violations. Ethan's eyes sparkled with mischief as he turned to look at me, momentarily masking any brotherly love just beneath the surface. Is this the same transgression that involves temporarily parking your moving truck on the grass? He asked, humor threading through his voice. I could have sworn I heard the faint echo of popcorn popping as I waited for Karen's response. She puffed herself up as if preparing for a major announcement. Exactly. Officer, this isn't just about breaking rules. This is about the principle of keeping our neighborhood pristine from squatters like him. And just like that, her grand drama unfurled in front of a captivated audience of 2. No pressure at all, right? Squatters? Ethan repeated, doubling over with laughter. You do realize he owns this house, right? It's his property. The sheer glow of karma took shape before my eyes as I watched Karen's once smug demeanor deflate like a punctured balloon. Realization crashed into her like a wave, and for a sweet moment, the roles were hilariously reversed. She looked almost comically shocked, her jaw unhinged, and her body frozen in denial. A tableau of justice. Meanwhile, I tried to suppress a fit of laughter, eager to watch her scramble for a response, as if the script had flipped on yet another cliché. With a satisfied grin, I leaned on my truck, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle, while Karen's cheeks turned a faint red, balancing the act between embarrassment and denial. "You can't just let him park there," she spluttered, the power dynamic severely skewed. "The homeowner's regulations say—" "Regulations regarding squatters?" Ethan cut in, not quite able to rein in his laughter. "Only a true estate god like you could equate someone moving in with parking violations," I chimed in, feeling a mix of victory and raucous amusement. "Oshkoden silent," her mind racing through an arsenal of comeback strategies, none of which seemed to be landing. Ethan nodded slightly in my direction. A true show of brother-bonding solidarity that I would gladly boast about until my own parking sins called for redress. I didn't even bother hiding my smirk before fully unleashing my sarcasm. "May I suggest planting flowers next to my grass for better aesthetics, Karen?" The tension was palpable, and I could almost taste the sweet catharsis in the air. It was clear that the expectations and authority she wielded like a pop star microphone had just crash-landed into a cliché of her own making. As she started to sputter and regain her composure, the line had been drawn, and I knew that living in this neighborhood was going to be a ride worth strapping in for. After all, who knew what comedic chaos an HOA leader could conjure? I was ready for anything that comes next. As Ethan and I stood side by side, basking in the aftermath of Karen's self-inflated meltdown, the air was thick with unspoken triumph. I was riding a wave of victory, feeling like the slayer of neighborhood dragons. Meanwhile, Karen remained caught in her existential crisis, her principles crumbling around her like the ancient ruins of a once mighty kingdom. "But for the love of all things pristine, you can't just flaunt the rules," she sputtered, waving her arms, a gesture that felt less like authority and more like a bird trying to fly in a windstorm. "Who will protect the neighborhood from your kind? What will the children think if they witness such lawlessness?" I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. "What kind, Karen? The kind who occasionally moves their stuff without a power suit and a clipboard?" I shot back, leaning into the moment. The neighbors had started to gather, amusement dancing across their faces as they realized they were witnessing a true neighborhood drama unfold. It was almost sitcom-worthy, scripted chaos replete with a villain, a hero, and plenty of epic one-liners. I figured I could lead a workshop titled "How to Out-Sarcast a Karen," a step-by-step guide to suburban survival. In that moment, the sounds of laughter and snickers grew louder. Even the golden retriever from next door looked amused, his tail wagging as if he understood this battle between good and evil. Ethan, now embracing his role as the lawman of the hour, an unlikely hero with a side of mockery, decided to press the issue. "Karen, I must inform you that if this man is a squatter, then I'm the President of the United States." His voice rang out with a playful firmness that put Karen's authority firmly back in its place. Ethan stood taller, casting a shadow over her like an unexpected thundercloud, fully aware of how badly he'd thrown a spanner in her meticulously crafted drama. The juxtaposition of her severe power suit against Ethan's soft blue uniform was like watching a carefully manicured lawn get trampled by a riotous stampede of goats, an impressive sight, indeed. But Karen wasn't ready to concede defeat, not yet, not with an audience now invested in her floundering ethos. "This is ridiculous. You can't just support him," she exclaimed, her voice climbing to a pitch usually reserved for opera singers. But before she could continue her tirade, the crowd had begun to giggle, caught up in the fantastic absurdity of it all. I grinned, relishing the fuel these hilarious exchanges added to the fire. "Oh, but I can," Ethan replied, with a flair that had all the gravitas of a triumphant general. "As a police officer, it's my duty to protect the rights of every citizen, including those moving into new homes. And right now, this citizen is both a homeowner and a live recipient of your overzealous HOA greetings." With all the wit and charm of a midnight talk show host, he turned to me. "Jordan, let's get our squatter supplies." I nearly doubled over, unable to restrain my laughter at how the roles had shifted. It was delightful to see Karen, the supposed queen of the HOA, left fumbling for recognition as her meticulously sculpted image of superiority had rapidly crumbled in front of our audience. I gestured grandly to Ethan, as if I were announcing the next big spectacle. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the squatter supplies. But first, I wanted to push my luck. Maybe we should mark off your precious grass with little squatter signs, Karen. Real estate gold, I tell you. With a hearty chuckle, I leaned against my truck. Karen's face was a masterpiece of shock and disbelief, each new wrinkle expressing the dawning realization that she might not have the upper hand after all. In that moment, I felt liberated. The looming threat of HOA fines no longer loomed over me like a rain cloud. Instead, the crowd, now full of my potential new friends, seemed to gravitate toward me with a sense of camaraderie. Somehow, we had become the counterbalance to the rigidness of neighborhood rules, a hopeful revolt against the suffocating powers of conformity that Karen insisted were sacred. Just as the laughter reached its zenith, Ethan's phone buzzed, a quick interruption, but an essential one. Sorry, duty calls, but remember, I'm keeping my eye on you, Jordan. He shot me a wink as he stepped away to answer, leaving me among my burgeoning fan club. They had opened the floodgates of camaraderie as we exchanged knowing glances, and I decided to double down on my newfound audacity, one hand pointed dramatically at Karen, and the other striking a mock serious pose. I hereby declare my mansion a squatter freedom zone. I couldn't resist the chance to channel my inner revolutionary. Would I be painted as a neighborhood hero or a rogue resident? Either way, I felt a thrill of satisfaction ripple through me, knowing this confrontation was bound to have a ripple effect on how the HOA would address issues, and perhaps even quiet the storm that was Karen. The laughter from the crowd swirling around us was like a sweet melody, merging into a chorus of triumph that echoed through the neighborhood. Seizing the moment, I struck an exaggerated pose, hands on hips, channeling my inner superhero, fully aware of the absurdity of the situation. I declare this yard the official squatter freedom zone, I proclaimed. The neighbors erupted in laughter and cheers. Finally, I noticed Mrs. Thompson next door, struggling to contain her laughter while bursting out with, "Long live the squatter." With each new giggle and snicker from my audience, Karen's authoritative facade cracked further, her entire identity as the fearsome HOA leader slipping away as though she'd stepped into a puddle while still wearing her glimmering stilettos. But just as I was basking in the glow of my newfound power, Karen's gaze hardened to laser focus, narrowing like a hunting hawk's. "You think this is funny?" she bellowed, her voice slicing through the laughter like a lawnmower through fresh grass. "Well, I have news for all of you. Squatting doesn't imply freedom. It implies—" I barely suppressed a snort at her dramatic cadence, ready to launch into a retort that would send not just Karen but also the neighborhood into spasms of mirth, when Ethan walked back into the fray, still on the phone. His laughter rang through the yard, rich and infectious as he interjected. "Or it implies I should start writing tickets for trespassing." The crowd erupted once more, and I nearly doubled over from laughter, feeling like a hopeless kid at a joke competition as Karen's face turned a delicate shade of crimson. But keeping the momentum was key, and I was not about to let Karen off the hook just yet. "Let's be honest, Karen," I added, leaning forward slightly, relishing the moment. "What were you planning to do if you caught me? Install a welcome squatter sign? Maybe you could put up a monthly newsletter with articles like "Squatters. They're just like us." I could see her sputtering for the right response, each breath railing against the tidal wave of mockery crashing down on her. It was an exhilarating game of verbal chess, and I was up a queen, a knight, and probably a bishop too. How was it that a simple backyard tussle could morph into neighborhood entertainment? I couldn't resist glancing at some kids gawking from behind the safety of their parents, wide-eyed and thrilled, as though reality TV had sprung to life right in front of them. Then came the ultimate twist. Karen, desperate now to reclaim her grip on the narrative, turned to the crowd. Her attempt at an inspirational soliloquy fell flat before it even began. "We ask for order and respect in our neighborhood," she declared, attempting to summon all her leftover authority with the wave of a dramatically poised arm. "Without rules, we have chaos," to which I shot back. "Well, Mrs. HOA President, chaos just might be the flavor of the day." My laughter joined the audience's cacophony, and I caught Ethan smirking as he leaned against the nearby lamppost, his arms crossed, completely unfazed by Karen's last gasp attempts to establish dominance. If anything, he looked like an amused spectator at the circus, filled with glee as his brother orchestrated a neighborhood coup. But Karen was nothing if not persistent, and just when I thought the wind had been thoroughly taken from her sails, she huffed defiantly, "You'll see, Jordan. I'll have the last laugh. This nonsense won't do anything but get you into trouble." Her face was a masterpiece of indignation, and the crowd, hungry for more small-town drama, leaned in, captivated. I could feel the tension building, the last remnants of authority simmering on the verge of ignition. As I leaned forward, the defeated smirk creeping back onto my lips, I said, "Trouble? Is that your final threat? Because I'm beginning to think those wild tales of squatter chaos may just earn me a neighborhood fan club." And just like that, I solidified my position as the underdog turned audacious rebel, breaking every rule that HOA tyrants held dear, casting a shadow over Karen's once unshakable authority. Ethan, who was now completely in on the shenanigans, chimed in, "You know, Karen, it's against the law to use your position to intimidate residents. Maybe you should rethink your approach." The playful jab landed, and audible gasps rippled through the crowd, making it clear that I was not the only one who had had enough of her antics. Karen's eyes darted around as if seeking support, but where she would normally demand silence, all she found were grinning faces leaning into the laughter. It was brilliant to see Karen matched against the very jokes she'd made about having control, and with each chuckle, her composure unraveled just a little bit more, as though she were a balloon letting out its air, slowly drifting away while the party just kept dancing. As we stood there, basking in the chaos of this dramatic showdown, I knew we had turned a pivotal page in our neighborhood saga. Ethan, watching my every move with an unapologetic grin, the neighbors sharing a camaraderie that had been previously stifled under Karen's regime. It was a moment of clarity, one that sparked the rebellion of spirit needed to challenge our rather rigid community. As Karen fumed and flailed, trapped in her futile calls for order amidst a backdrop of laughter, I could already see future gatherings around the BBQ, all in favor of a new HOA motto, "Let the squatters in." Who knew this whole squatter saga would lead to such side-splitting hilarity? Would Karen finally lick her wounds and relent, or would the battle for neighborhood pride continue? Amidst the whirlwind of laughter and light-hearted banter, the air crackled with a tangible sense of victory, a stark contrast to the overpowering rule of the HOA that had silenced us for too long. It felt as if we had all collectively come alive, miraculously infused with courage, and tasted the exhilarating sweetness of rebellion. As Karen floundered like a fish out of water, I felt a surge of energy right down to my toes. "Look at this crowd, Karen!" I shouted, gesturing toward the throng of neighbors who were now united in revelry against her monotonous reign. They don't want just rules, they want fun. They want to feel alive. And a no-fun policy is strictly outdated, especially in the glorious land of suburbia. The moment felt almost surreal, as if I were the lead actor in a play where the script took an unexpected twist, with the audience rooting for a happily untangled ending. The raucous laughter drowned out Karen's flustered rebuttals, the kind of simmering complaints that now seemed utterly absurd given this turn of events. I could hardly fathom how quickly the tides had turned. One minute, she was an intimidating embodiment of HOA authority, and the next, she was reduced to sputtering indignation, clutching her perfectly ironed blazer, as if it could shield her ego from impending humiliation. "Well, if you think this is acceptable, you have no idea what the real consequences are," she barked back, her voice sharp and jarring against the laughter that pierced the stillness of our neighborhood. Yet, instead of cowering, the crowd only leaned closer, their hungry ears drinking in every word, ready to challenge her at her own game. Ethan, who stood like a lighthouse amidst the storm, never lost his devil-may-care demeanor, twirling the pen on his police clipboard with playful nonchalance. "Come on, Karen. Slandering my brother is a good way to make all your little HOA rules look questionable," he laughed, planting another seed of doubt in the minds of the gathered neighbors. For every charge her tongue attempted to launch, He would counter-hack, transforming stern threats into punchlines that punctured her authority. Maybe we should all just become squatters. As a form of protest, he quipped, causing a fresh wave of chuckles to ripple through the crowd. Was it possible I had awakened a comrade in arms in my own brother? We were like a comedic duo stepping on the stage of suburbia, and Karen was the butt of our collective jokes. As the laughter died down momentarily, I seized on the opportunity like a hawk. Karen, even the best laws have loopholes, I quipped, leaning closer to ensure every neighbor could catch the full impact of my words. We could always look into those little amendments that let us squatterize the neighborhood. Maybe we'll even make a festival out of it. You could be our honored squatter-in-chief. I emphasized squatter-in-chief, relishing the notion as Karen's face shifted hues faster than a traffic light. It was a delicious realization washing over me. Not only had I managed to stand my ground, but I had also accrued a community behind me that suddenly found solidarity in a collective sense of amusement. Words like squatter had just evolved into symbols of defiance, and Karen had unwittingly become the marginalized antagonist in our local sitcom. By this point in the performance, the neighbors were eating out of my hand. I could see old Mr. Jenkins, the grizzled war veteran, stroking his white beard and nodding enthusiastically as I riffed on the absurdity of Karen's self-importance. Friends, I called, fetching their attention from the depths of their laughter-induced stupor. Let's be honest. Now that we live in the glorious age of squatting, we might as well embrace it. With freedom of expression at our fingertips, the HOA can't control this laughter. It's contagious. Join me in the revolution. Their roars of agreement filled my heart with an intoxicating blend of joy and mirth that I'd never felt before. And for the first time, anxiety about the dreaded HOA faded into the recesses of my mind. Just as the laughter softened and a sense of unity hung in the air, Karen launched a last-ditch rebuttal, her voice wavering ever so slightly. "You might think this is a joke, Jordan," she said, her tone venomous with bitterness. "But I'll make sure you regret this. You'll pay for your carefree antics." The crowd collectively gasped, but I playfully rolled my eyes, refusing to feed her fire. "Is that a threat, Karen?" I smirked, raising an eyebrow theatrically. "Because I'm pretty sure dealing with a powerless HOA squatter uprising is about as threatening as a cat meowing at a dog." The laughter that ensued was raucous enough to shake the leaves on the trees, solidifying her fate while it crumbled her the last remnants of power with each chuckle. Now I could finally see Karen beginning to grasp the futility of her efforts. She was losing not just this battle, but the war she had been waging against the very essence of neighborly camaraderie. My heart raced as I watched her demeanor fracture bit by bit. The raucous applause of the neighborhood felt like wave after wave crashing against the rock of her resolve. Perhaps now that I'd shown her the absurdity of her entitled expectations, she would learn to pick her battles in the future. But as I stood there listening to the contagious ripples of laughter, I couldn't help but wonder, was it possible that I had not only won this skirmish but also opened the door to a new chapter in our neighborhood's history? Would Karen relinquish her fearsome reign just to save face? Or just hunker down and double down on her pursuit for order? The answers loomed in the air like a cloud waiting to burst. All I could do was wait and savor the victory of this moment. The atmosphere was charged with electric camaraderie, neighbors exchanging gleeful glances filled with newfound unity, as if they just signed a secret pact to repel the HOA tyranny together. Karen's attempts at intimidation crumbled before them like stale bread, and I couldn't help but bask in the warmth of my triumph. Surely, as the clock ticked on, the whispers of laughter would resonate through our little suburb, transforming our collective frustration into a metaphorical bonfire of rebellion. But just when I thought Karen had retreated to lick her wounds, she stepped back in dramatically, hands on her hips as if ready to recite the HOA's constitution like it was an incantation. "This isn't over, Jordan," she proclaimed, eyes narrowing, and it felt like a scene ripped straight from a bad action movie. Was she aware that every word she uttered was turning her into the villain of our neighborhood tale? Ethan stifled a laugh, the sound a delightful contrast to the tension rippling through the air. "You know, Karen, it's like a bad remake of a horror film," he mused, drawing chuckles from the crowd as the absurdity of her threats morphed into comedic relief. No offense, but the pathos of your villainous speech is a little too overwhelming for this neighborhood. Maybe take a class on lighthearted monologues for control freaks? The laughter that followed echoed like a rebuke, and I watched Karen's expression shift from indignation to fury, her bravado starting to resemble a deflated balloon. For a brief moment, I entertained the delightful thought that we might be introducing an entirely new genre of neighbors united against the Lady Macbeth of HOA. As the crowd erupted into laughter, I couldn't resist indulging in the absurdity of it all. So, I chimed in, leaning closer to the throng. What should we do about our dear Karen? Should we throw a welcome revolution party? Maybe we can roast marshmallows over an outdoor bonfire while we discuss renovations and squatters' rights? The collective enthusiasm bubbled over, and I watched as faces lit up with gleeful abandon, each person imagining the ultimate squatters' block party. Let's decorate our homes with "We're not squatters" signs, or better yet, "Squatters for Equality" banners. Who's with me? The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause at the sheer outrageousness of it all, while I felt as though I'd tapped into an underground stream of liberation coursing through suburban hearts that had long been shackled in monotony. Just as I was reveling in my moment of glory, Karen's expression morphed into a masked concoction of disbelief and righteous indignation. "This is unacceptable behavior," she screeched, sounding so over the top that it bordering on comedic farce. "You cannot possibly think you can overturn the HOA without consequences." I could feel myself start to chuckle at the mounting absurdity. The image of her minion-like presence threatened by enthusiastic homeowners preparing for a squatters' uprising. Like a cartoon character teetering on a cliff, she was losing her grip on power with each syllable of outrage she delivered. "Sorry, Karen, this isn't a dictatorship," I quipped with a mischievous twinkle in my eye. "It's a neighborhood, and we've just decided to exert our free will. Try to keep up." With each attempt to reclaim control, Karen seemed unwittingly to take our neighborhood to new comedic heights. The neighbors rallied together, cheering on my sarcastic remarks like a feverish audience at a comedy show, and I marveled at the extent to which our community was willing to embrace a lighthearted rebellion. "We're going to bury subservience in the backyard, Karen," I shouted, the laughter swelling. "Right next to the traditional HOA bylaws. Who's with me on that?" In my peripheral vision, I caught a glimpse of Karen cringing as the cacophony of laughter reached a crescendo, the kind of storm that toppled even the mightiest of wills. I suspected she was methodically calculating her retaliation, but as far as I was concerned, she had stepped into our impromptu comedy club and was being metaphorically heckled by the masses. As the rallying cries turned into an anthem of neighborly defiance, I turned back to Ethan, who wore a grin broader than a Cheshire cat. In that moment, I recognized our shared joy amidst the chaos. Two brothers standing against the alleged queen of our suburban castle, united in all its ridiculousness. "I guess we'll have to bust out the hot dogs and s'mores, huh?" I joked, the camaraderie sparking a glimmer of hope that perhaps we could reclaim our blissful neighborhood one laugh at a time. The throngs nodded and murmured enthusiastically, and I couldn't help but picture us clinging to our newfound joy, forming closer bonds over both imaginary and real squatter gatherings. Could this really shift the HOA's tight grip? But just as I thought our laughter had put the brakes on Karen's ill-fated plotting, she mustered up a final gasp of authority. "How dare you?" she proclaimed, her voice rising in pitch before blowing out into an exasperated exhale. "You think this is all just fun and games? Let me remind you, there are consequences to all of this." I waved her desperate insistence dismissively, grinning while thinking how much fun it would be to hold an HOA explaining exactly how to be a fun squatter seminar. And just like that, I realized her threat had turned into nothing more than a punchline. "Good luck, Karen. Just remember, when life hands you squatter lemons, you can always turn them into lemonade, or perhaps something more festive." With that last jab, the crowd erupted once again with outrageous delight, leaving Karen oscillating between anger and sheer bewilderment. Little did we know, as the laughter wove its magic, the real magic was only beginning. In the moments that followed, I could feel the tides of our neighborhood's spirit shifting, as newfound friendships and alliance against Karen's iron fist unfolded like beautifully colored origami. Not only had the squatter saga united us beneath the banner of humor, but we'd possibly unearthed a resilience that could challenge even the mightiest of HOA despots, a glorious revolution birthed from confrontation and laughter. So, who's prepared to embark on this delightful and whimsical squatter journey ahead? I asked, and as hands raised and cheers followed my proclamation, I turned to see Karen retreat gradually, her silhouette retreating, becoming a backdrop for what might just be the dawn of something beautifully chaotic within our suburban paradise. What would happen next? Would Karen acknowledge her loss? Or would she come storming back with more ridiculous demands? The stage had been set for a showdown that promised to educate us all in fascination and hilarity alike. The excitement in the air was palpable. It felt like the final moments of a climactic movie scene where the underdog had finally rallied against the imposing villain. Karen stood there, fury etched in every line of her furrowed brow, but as I glanced around the circle of neighbors beaming back at me, I became acutely aware that her reign of neighborhood terror was slowly dissipating like morning fog in the sun. Doubt flashed across her face for the briefest moment, but before I could seize the opportunity, she regained her composure and launched into yet another monologue fit for the stage of an avant-garde tragedy. This isn't about a silly celebration, Jordan. You're challenging the very fabric of our community. You'll see the HOA does things for the greater good, she declared, invoking her credentials like a badge of honor, as furious indignation coursed through her words. Were both of us auditioning for a drama club? Ethan caught my eye, barely suppressing laughter as I struggled to maintain an air of seriousness during her almost melodramatic performance. Karen, sweetie, I called out, we're not trying to tear any fabric, we just want to loosen the buttons a little. Can we not go through a small rebellion without it feeling like a Revolutionary War reenactment? Just breathe, and maybe consider how this can lead to improved neighborly rapport. The crowd erupted in laughter again, their gleeful mischief fueling our sense of victorious uprising. I could see a flicker of uncertainty in Karen's cold blue eyes. For all her bluster and intimidation tactics, she hadn't anticipated the collective power of community laughter, disarming her authoritative facade. It was almost poetic, how in that hilariously chaotic moment, the very essence of joy was stripping the entitlement right out of her hands. But if I thought we had her cornered, I was in for a twist. Just then, Karen's face morphed again, from indignation to desperation, punctuated by a booming proclamation that she, of course, was prepared for this kind of uprising. You think this is merely humorous? You will see, Jordan, I have reserves you know nothing about, she exclaimed, her confidence wavering, but her sheer obsession with control still fighting to unleash its fury. I couldn't help myself. The vision of her clad in HOA armor, reeking of entitlement, was too good a mental picture to resist. You mean the reserves of your mimeographed bylaws? How about you treat us to a fun interpretative dance of those rules, Karen? That definitely adds some flair to this HOA situation, I quipped, as glistening laughter filled the neighborhood. The neighbors were rallying, people I'd barely exchanged hellos with before were now chuckling vigorously, their eyes alight with shared rebellion. We were no longer just a collection of individuals boxed in our homes, but rather a raucous ensemble working toward a whimsical revolution, spurred on by a quirk of fate and incandescent laughter. Soon, there were murmurs about organizing genuine housewarming parties with absurd themes. Squatter's Delight, complete with fake protest signs and mock HOA applications, lay at the forefront of the new spirit enveloping our once somber enclave. I could practically see the collective exhale of liberation surrounding us, pushing Karen further into a corner she had seemingly built for herself. Who knew all it would take were some careless, comically inspirational ideas to sprout unity? Yet, as the humor and euphoria danced on air, I felt an unexpected pang of pity for Karen. Beneath the relentless facade of entitlement, was she somehow just missing out on something simpler? The thought was soon interrupted by the appearance of our neighboring widow, Mrs. Thompson, known for her delightful baking skills. She brandished her famous marshmallow bars triumphantly, proclaiming, "These can serve as the first sweet offerings for the anticipated squatter's feast." I nearly fell over from humor. Was this our hilarious salvation? I rolled with it, shrugging dramatically. Well, in that case, let's set a date for the squatter's cookout extravaganza. RSVP mandatory. No Karen-approved cookies allowed. And just like that, Karen was trapped in our jovial web, her every attempt to wriggle out of our delightful embrace, only tightening the bonds of rebellion we had woven around her. In the grand scheme of suburban life, who would ever think that a simple accusation of squatting could ignite such fervor and creativity? As the laughter reached its zenith, I turned back to Ethan, my rock in this chaotic cyclone. He was now the epitome of serene amusement, almost meditative in his expressions, as he took in the absurdity of it all. "I can't wait to write in my journal about this," he snorted. "Sister cities may come and go, but this hilarity shall forever reign supreme in this little suburb. I can hear the HOA's next workshop. How not to be a Karen 101. Wouldn't you agree?" We both roared in laughter, the moment feeling surreal. Two brothers. One idealistic idiot sparking a transformation in community dynamics, all thanks to a squatter storyline that spiraled into jubilant narrations and unexpected alliance. As I looked at the jubilant faces around me, I could feel the tides of change sweeping through our neighborhood, carrying along the remnants of Karen's attempted reign. The ephemeral grip she'd held was fading, replaced by laughter-induced camaraderie. "Let's build a community where we celebrate oddball ideas instead of stifling them," I declared, emboldened by an intoxicating blend of adrenaline and humor. And who knows? If life hands us HOA lemons, we might concoct next week's potluck squatter lemonade from them. A toast to our collective craziness. The neighbors cheered, affirming their commitment to this newfound spirit of togetherness, buoyed not just by rebellion, but by genuine joy. As the sun now began to dip low over our little neighborhood, painting the world in an ethereal light and casting playful shadows on all of us gathered, I spotted Karen trembling slightly, her once popular power now flickering out like an unhealthy battery. Perhaps her theatrics hadn't envisioned this architecture of unity against her reign. But as I stood at the center of this small revolt, feeling buoyed by camaraderie, absurdity, and a dash of the unconventional, I couldn't deny the powerful lesson woven in this hilarious tapestry. Laughter is indeed the greatest resistance. How might our comically surreal journey unfold further as Karen regrouped, seeking her next tactical response?